Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we are putting the drawer slides in and starting to do the dovetail work on these drawers. This is getting exciting because it's starting to come together, so let's get to it. Let's pick this up where we last left off. We're going to take these legs and now we want to actually create these slides that go between the legs for the drawers to then slide on. So I'm going to start laying out where I want these to go, and I want them to be the exact same spot on both the legs. So I'm laying them out together with the square running across both legs. And then I can mark in the sides of the slot for this. And so they're going to be out of these 3/4 by 3/4 inch squares. And in the back legs, they're actually going to mortise into these and go down about 3/8 of an inch or so. And so for that, we need to cut these all the same length. And then I'm going to use one of the scraps to then mark out exactly the size of the mortise on this. So we can cut them all to length and make them happy. Here's one of the scraps, and I can lay it out on here and then draw out where the square is. So I have 2 of the sides marked, and then I can mark the other 2 sides with that scrap and make sure that they're all the same. Then we can come in and chisel them out. I'm going to chop in from either end of it, so across the grain, and then pare out in between it. Once I get down a little ways, then I'm going to go right into the marking gauge line and take it down a little bit more. So I'm going to continue this on, chop in, pare down to the chop, and then go to the other side, chop in, pare down to the chop, until I get it down to depth. I love this little depth adjuster I got from the Pacific Northwest Tool Collectors. But we can keep going on this until we get it down to the same depth all the way across. You kind of come in from both sides, you get this ridge in the middle, and then you'll have to come in and pare out that ridge just a little bit. So we can tap these in and make sure we have a good fit. I am really, really happy with how these came in. Nice and snug. Almost don't need any glue. Now we need to cut slots to attach them to the front arched leg. Yay! So to do that, we're actually going to put this whole leg assembly together and lock it down on the bench. I'm using a couple holdfasts to hold it in place, and I want to make sure that the everything coming off of the back leg is square to it. So we're going to push it into place and then lock it down. So each and every one of these are perfectly square to the back. Now that these are all square and to the back, then we can draw lines on the arch and transfer those lines down onto that arch. So I know exactly where those will intersect with this. So we're going to be cutting out dados running across these. And they will go down about 3/8 of an inch, so halfway through the 3/4 thickness. So I can mark lines down the front and back of the leg, and then put in a depth thickness mark as well. So we can saw down as we can cut all the way across this down to that depth mark, and then we can come in and chisel out the waist. You can see how we're just going down a little ways, just about 3/4 of an inch, half the thickness of the 3/4 by 3/4 rod. 3/8 of an inch down. Then we can chisel out. Stay away from the line. I got a little too close on that one, but you can see how stay away from the line and get a little closer and a little closer, and you'll get a nice clean cut all the way down. Getting rid of any of the burrs and make sure it's all fully down to depth. Bring in a router plane, and this will make sure that everything is exactly the same depth on all of these. That way all of your rails are identical all the way across. Routers are so much fun to play with. So now we can see how this just fits down in there rather snugly, but works all the way down to the bottom. Happiness. So now we can start the actual assembly on this. Put the rods back into the back leg and then fit them down into the front arch. And that is basically all that's holding them together. Now I'm going to cut some pins because we are going to glue this all up. Now that all of the carcass is built, it's time to glue it up so that we can then get drawers into this. For the pins, I'm going to be using walnut. It is some dowel that I purchased a while ago, and this will work out really nicely as it'll be a good contrast for the white oak. I'm going to round over the ends to make sure that they go in well because these are drawboard. But before we go any farther, we're actually going to come in and clean out everything because we're going to be gluing this up. So any of the glue squeeze out or any of the other problems or marks that we've made, we want to clean those out. And we're going to add chamfers to everything that needs to add a chamfer to it, get everything ready for the glue up. The chamfers on this, I'm just putting a light chamfer on the outside of all the pieces to match the chamfers that are on the legs of the desk. And it's nice how a little bit of a chamfer comes through and makes everything really pleasing. For the straight edges, we use block plane. For the rounded edges, use a spoke shave, and we get them down until they are right about where I want. I'm not marking anything, I'm just doing it by eye, and I'm bringing them to something that looks about the same on all of them. For the glue on this, I'm going to be using TotalBoat High Performance. I want to use this because I need a lot of open time. I'm going to be doing a lot of work on this, and it was about 45 minutes or so of actually working on it, and so having this will give me all the open time I need. Plus, if there's any gaps, this is one of the best glues for any gap work. So it's going to be put one piece in place and then pin it down in, and then put the next piece in and pin it down in, and then so on. You can see I will fit a little bit into all of these slots, and then we can put in the drawer slides that go in between them. And I really love the fit on these. They come out and they just tap in place and then lock back in, and very, very pleasing. So we're going to make each of these leg assemblies, and then once we have these leg assemblies, we can then put in the dovetailed stretchers in between them, applying a little bit of epoxy to all surfaces, particularly any long grain to long grain connection. Pound them down in and make it happy. Then we have 2 more that go across the top and bottom. And you can see where I had a good bit of epoxy squeeze out on there. The leg slid on me when tapping it in. It's not a problem because the epoxy actually cleans up pretty easily with a chisel. So there is the frame, but we want to make sure we clamp this all together. With epoxy, you don't have to have a huge amount of clamping force. You just need to have enough to make sure that it holds in place. So I've got squeeze clamps and hand screw clamps all over this thing. Yeah, just a lot of fun. Now I want to make sure that this is all good and square, and the back one wasn't exactly square, so I put a beam from one side to the other side to pull it together, and then I can make sure, that's square. Happiness. Now we can take this whole thing apart after it's set overnight, and we can do a lot of the little finishing touches on it before we get to the drawers. It didn't sit quite flat, but I'll be able to work on that in the future a little bit, which we'll talk about that in a future video. All of the dovetails on the inside, the pins on the inside needed to be cleaned off flush, and the ones on the outside, I'm going to leave those alone until we get to the final details before finish. So now let's work on the drawers. I want these drawers to be perfectly square, so since I've squared up this shooting board, let's go ahead and use it. We'll square up one end and then cut them all to the exact length. The boards going side to side on the drawer, the front and back, need to be the exact width of the carcass. So I put those on the carcass to draw their line, and then we can bring those over the bench, and I will cut one, and I'll make the other one match that one exactly. And then same thing with the front and back. I have measurements for that on the plans. I cut one of them, and then I make the other one match it exactly. So for the dovetails in this, originally I was going to be doing show tails, which are where you have the dovetails reversed, putting the tails on the front board. But I got a lot of people who really didn't want that. And since the sides of this are open, I thought, let's go ahead and do half blinds on this. So on the back drawers, they're going to be through dovetails, and on the fronts, they're going to be the half line. There's the word. But I was realizing my dovetail saw is pretty dull. So I took a couple minutes and went through and cleaned it up. And now, ooh la la, she cuts like fun. So I'm using the carcass saw to cut in across the grain and the dovetail saw to cut down on the sides. I'm going to cut in with all of the lines and then come in and clean it all out. If you want to see a video, I have a video where I show my method for cutting dovetails. It's just really quick and simple. I don't always use dividers. A lot of times I'll just do it by eye, but because you're going to be seeing these so prominently, I just decided to pull out the dividers on it. For the waste that's in between, chop in away from the line and then pare out. If you stack up the boards like this, it's much quicker because you can do the same operation from board to board to board. And when you have multiples of them to do, it makes it much, much easier. Once you're down about halfway, then put it right into that marking gauge line and chop it down nice and vertical. Then we can flip the boards over and do the exact same thing from the other side, and voila, we've got tails. To transfer the tails over, I'm going to put a block plane on the other end and make sure that the board is at the exact same height, and that will give me lines that I can then cut the pins. Making sure to cut on the right side of the line because we don't want to be messing that up. We'll cut down to depth and then clean them up. In this case, I think that was the one that wasn't quite square. It had a little bit of a bulge in the middle because I didn't clean that one up with the shooting board. So you can set the block plane on there and then mark it with the other one. And then just like before, make sure you're cutting the waste out, not the pins. There's some experience talking there. This is usually where people make the mistake of cutting pins, is they've gotten used to cutting the outsides and then and then they get to the end and, oh no, not a problem. So we can bring in the file, clean this up, and we got a nice clean fit. The file just allows me to sneak up on it and we make sure that everything is square and pleasing. Now the next thing we need to do is actually cut grooves into, we're going to cut the half-line dovetails. Before I do that, we need to do half-line dovetails. So we're going to cut tails on the sideboards just like we did before, but these only go down halfway. Transfer the lines just like we did before. And in this case, we're going to cut corner to corner, but to get all the way back in there, if you get a card scraper that's the same thickness as your plate, you can tap that down in to actually chop out the excess and get right up into that corner. This is an old trick, but it works out pretty well, and that way you don't have to be chopping down as you work. It allows you to get right down into that corner. I'm probably going to be putting out a video here soon showing my method for half-line dovetails. I did a live on it a while ago, but we just keep going until we get right up onto that line, and then chop it all down and clean it out. And here's where a dovetail chisel really comes in. This fishtail allows you to get down tight into those corners and get a nice clean cut. And I don't always use it, but when I do, it is a lifesaver. So now we've made that on, we can test our fit, make sure that these slide in exactly the way we want. Hey, look at that, half-line dovetails. Be showing off the figure on the drawer face. So now we need to cut these slides for the drawers to fit in. We're actually going to put this all in place and make sure that it is exactly where we want it. And you can see how this will then fit inside the carcass. But we want it to slide in the slides rather than on the slides, and that will capture it better. To do that, the pin, the middle pin on this one, actually interacts with it. So we have to cut that down so that we're cutting off the same amount that slide will be sticking into the side of the drawer. And then on this one, we're going to be cutting in a long groove that goes all the way along the board, but will stop just shy of the other end. And this groove will be what that slide fits into. So we're going to start at the stopped end of the groove, and I'm going to stay a good ways away from the line, chop in, pair out, chop in, pair out, chop in, pair out, just like we're cutting off a dovetail. We're only going to do it down to depth. Here again, I'll use that depth gauge, and this will allow me to find out exactly how deep we want it to go. I'm still going to stay away from the end of the groove. I don't want to take it all the way. And for this, I'm actually going to be using my router plane to make the whole groove. And here I have it set a bit too deep, and I realize that. It's like, let's back it up a little bit. And so with this, you can go with the grain and just take it down a little ways. So you'll plane it out, adjust the depth, and then plane it out again. And then adjust the depth down a little bit and plane it out again. And you just keep going down until you're down to depth and everything is pleasing. You can use the depth gauge then to come in and check it out. Make sure that the drawer slide actually slides in. And now with that cleaned out, we can chop out the end until we get a nice fit. In this case, I needed to use a rabbet side plane. This actually will clean up the sides of the groove. You can see how that drawer fits in there, and nice and happy. Now we can put the drawer all together and slide it in. And there we go. Very pleasing. There you have it. We have the drawer slides in, which I'm really, really happy to see how this came out. Get it all glued together. This is really exciting because we're getting to the point where we have drawers. Now I have to continue to make the other 3 drawers. It's going to be the exact same thing. Just repeat and do it over again. And then hopefully next time we'll get together and we'll put the drawer bottoms in them, and maybe getting to do some of the electrical and putting the switch and control into this. We'll also be carving out in the front of each of the drawers a handhold for them, and I'm really, really getting excited about this because it's coming together. Yeah, I'm happy. So I hope you like this, and I am really looking forward to the next video or 2 getting this all done. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, ideas, and comments down below. Also, I want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are the reason why I can keep doing videos like this, and without you, this would not be. Also, we now have the membership option here on this channel as well as on the main channel. You can click the little join button down below there for ideas on that. So I hope you like this. If you do have any questions, let me know. And until next time, have a wonderful day. I really hope that this thing doesn't fall on the floor because I hate it when I drop my drawers.